Good to see you. I'm Dorian, and this is Last Call Baseball, number 158. Last week, I forgot to talk about a game that was on the Roku channel. I don't know, a streaming service, whatever the heck Roku calls themselves. Because, MLB, God forbid that they actually have it on one channel or a few channels. They have them all over the place. What was it? Back on Sunday, June 30th, 2024, Roku broadcasted the Pittsburgh Pirates at the Atlanta Braves. Obviously, Roku doesn't normally broadcast baseball, so they just Frankenstein together a TV production. They had the Atlanta Braves TV play-by-play announcer, Brandon Gaudin, and they matched him up with the Pittsburgh Pirates TV analyst, Matt Capps. And it was interesting. I'm not going to badmouth. Both these guys individually and their own teams are awesome, but it was almost like witnessing or listening to a blind date for 2.5 hours. How did Matt and Brandon go about this? I mean, did they just meet like an hour before the lights went on? Did they just meet at the pre-production meeting that morning? And by the way, that Roku game was at 11:35 Eastern time in the morning, 11:35 a.m. Eastern time. Did Brandon and Matt text each other beforehand? I almost felt listening to them talk because they were kind of like, the way I interpreted was that Matt and Brandon were feeling themselves out. Obviously, Matt had a whole mess of information on the Pittsburgh Pirates. He watches them every single day. Brandon had a whole mess of information on the Atlanta Braves. He watches the Braves every single day. As I'm watching this sports blind date, it gave me a flashback. I almost felt that I was watching one of those late 90s, early 2000s dating shows. Do you remember? Like on MTV Singled Out or Blind Date or MTV's Next, where you had a whole bus full of people that wanted to go out on a date with one person. And they would come out of the bus and they would say some really corny, like 2 or 3 sentence line about like how awesome they are or whatever. And they would just move on. It's so awesome. I think you can still watch it like on YouTube or one of these random channel 800, whatever, on whatever your cable, if you even have cable, I don't know. MTV's Next, Blind Date, Singled Out. It was like Brandon and Matt were on a platonic sports blind date. And I think they did a good enough job that, considering the fact they probably didn't even know each other's last name like 3 hours before, at 8:30 in the morning when they're having breakfast together, when they're probably down at the Waffle House in, in Cobb County. If Roku had brought me in as an executive producer, I would have done that. The dating show. That would have been a great segment to start the games. Like, you make fun of yourself, Roku. Obviously, no one really associates sports with Roku. But you're like, hey, look, these are two blind analysts. We're going to mash them together for the next 2.5 hours, and we're going to watch these two baseball teams play for you at 11:30 in the morning while you're still having your eggs and your avocado, or you're going to church, you're coming back from church, whatever the heck, or you're just waking up from last night. They should have done that. Dating show segment. And to be fair, the thing I enjoyed most about the Roku broadcast was the in-game interviews. I actually think that those were better than the actual game. And the ones I remember were, they had an in-game interview with Rowdy Tellez when he's playing first base. So he's with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And also Paul Skeens, because Paul Skeens had pitched the night before against Atlanta, and he pitched, I think, like 7 innings, and he was Paul Skeens. He's phenomenal. And then Roku did like the double TV box on your screen. So on the lower left-hand side was the game, the upper right-hand side was the person they were interviewing. I wasn't a fan of that at all. I didn't like it at all. But again, Roku, if you're going to do this again, bring back those dating shows for your Frankenstein TV broadcast pair. Singled Out, Blind Date, MTV's Next, or whatever it's called. Now you know what I was watching last week. I'm going to ask you, what are you watching this summer? Wimbledon? Baseball? Formula One? Lewis Hamilton just won the British Open. The British Grand Prix. You're watching Copa America? We're in the Final Four, I think. Yeah. Brazil got knocked out. Or are you watching the European Championships? England, Spain. I think that's going to be the final, by the way, in the Euro 2024, England and Spain. Are you watching the NBA Summer League? Heck no. What about the Olympics? Over the weekend, I watched the Savannah Bananas, the world baseball famous Savannah Bananas on ESPN. They were playing a team called the Firefighters. I've heard so much about the firefighters. I've heard so much about the Savannah Bananas. I've listened to interviews with the Savannah Bananas on podcast. I've read articles about them. I've seen pictures of them in articles. I've never even gone on YouTube to actually see it. But I watched about 3 or 4 innings off and on in between commercials, watching something else. My first impressions of the Savannah Bananas and Banana Ball. I don't get it. I don't get it. If those of you who don't know, Savannah Bananas, the whole point of them is obviously to play baseball, but to be super entertaining. If you don't like the pitch clock in baseball, you're probably not going to like the Savannah Bananas because their whole games are supposed to start and finish at or under 2 hours. There's actually a time clock that does not stop. And it's part like wrestling, part choreographed dances. They have trick plays. They have points. They get runs. It was really hard for me to follow because they probably explained the rules at the beginning of the broadcast, which I didn't turn the TV on in time. And the Savannah Bananas are going on a tour all over the U.S. I think they were playing this weekend. They played in Buffalo, New York. I think next weekend they're going to be playing in Washington, D.C. at Nationals Park where the Washington Nationals play. And I always thought to myself, I want to go buy tickets and watch the Savannah Bananas because I love, for example, the Latin American Winter Leagues, the passion that the fans bring, the flair of the players. But this was, I don't want to say at another level, this was just different. Apparently there's a rule in Banana Ball that if the batter hits a foul ball, obviously goes into the stands, and someone in the stands catches it, then that's an out for the team at bat. Let me say that again. If you as a batter hit a foul ball into the stands and someone catches it, it's an out on your team. Okay. And they break out sometimes into song and dance, not song, but dance. There was a designated runner who had a motorcycle helmet on, which I thought was funny, but I'm like, that must be hot as heck to be in the summer there. I don't know how hot it was in Buffalo, New York this weekend, but I wouldn't want to put one of those dirt bike helmets, the ones that go all around your head and running around the baseball field, baseball bases. I don't get it. I need to watch more Savannah Banana Ball and actually read up on the rules. I really would have appreciated if the broadcasters had throughout the game reminded the viewers, oh, by the way, in Banana Ball, X is Y and Y is X and this, that, and the other. Because I was like, I don't get it. But what I do get is I thought it was cool that both the firefighters and the Savannah Bananas each had a female player. And I saw that and I was like, what? That's different. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just different. But you know what? That's awesome as well. And what I loved was the Savannah Bananas female player is a softball player by the name of Ashton Lansdale, excuse me. She's a former softball player with FIU, Florida International University. And we had the baseball coach, Carson Whitson, back in December of 2023 on. And I think it's great. And apparently she played at softball at FIU and obviously in the college, Division I. And then she just recently transferred to play, I think, one more season over with Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi. And she's on, and Ashton is on the women's college Olympic softball team, something like that. I mean, I think that's freaking awesome that they have females playing professional baseball. Savannah Banana rules, but it's still professional baseball because a lot of these guys were in minor league systems of professional teams. They were in the independent leagues, etc. So my TV viewing experience, watch more Savannah Bananas. That's on me. And I also want them to have better broadcasters in the sense of better explaining what Savannah Banana Ball is. What Banana Ball is, that's what they call it. Give me a moment. I'm going to have a drink here. I don't know about you, but I like to have a drink while I read sometimes. And at the beginning of the summer, there are always lists, whether it's on TV or in newspapers. The summer reads. I never actually really believed that. I'm not going to read some book that someone recommended to me because it was on some random channel or the Wall Street Journal decided to tell me that this is what I should read. No. But I am going to tell you. I was reading a book by the name of The 7 Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence, who is more famously known colloquially as the famous Lawrence of Arabia. He was a British Army officer, and the book, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, is about his experience in the Arab Revolt against the Ottoman Empire during World War One, basically 107 years ago. Amazing. I found myself with my phone at my hand while I'm reading because he's writing in an English that's over a century old. So he's writing in a not so much a Victorian English, but more of an Edwardian English in the time that he came up with. King Edward was the son of Queen Victoria, who succeeded to the throne of England when Queen Victoria died in 1901. So T.E. Lawrence is of a certain, his formation is of a certain era. His English is of a certain era. And some of the English words that he uses are absolutely hilarious. One of the words that I love that I've written down, I'm like, I'm going to use this word in everyday conversation. Hobbledehoy. Hobbledehoy. The definition of hobbledehoy is a clumsy or awkward youth. Because he was talking about some young man who was part of a tribe, I think outside of modern day Syria. None of these countries existed, obviously, 107 years ago. It was all mostly tribes, but it's a very interesting book. It's a long book. It's taken me many, many months to read it. I think it's like 670 pages. To pull this back to a sports reference, I'm pretty sure that T.E. Lawrence... No, I know that T.E. Lawrence played cricket, but I don't know how good he played cricket. Cricket being the cousin of baseball. Is this a book report podcast or a baseball podcast? The next book I want to read is called The Franchise, Atlanta Braves by Mark Bowman. Mark Bowman is the day-to-day beat writer for the Atlanta Braves. It's his first book, and it was just published a few weeks ago, and it's already been sold out. It's like a bestseller on Amazon. They're doing a second run on it. It seems like it's awesome. I obviously haven't read it. I just read the quick extract on Amazon, and I didn't know this, that Bobby Cox, the legendary Hall of Fame Atlanta Braves manager, was the first base coach for the World Series champion 1977 New York Yankees. And he was there not just to be the first base coach, but to make sure that Billy Martin, the crazy, insane, but tactically genius New York Yankees manager, wouldn't get into fights at bars. He wouldn't get into fight with his superstar, Reggie Jackson. I was like, this is even better. Not only did I want to read this book because it's the Atlanta Braves, like that little excerpt that I read on Amazon, I was like, that's super interesting. I didn't know that. And apparently, of all the chapters, it seems like they're all very quick chapters you can dip in and out of. It's not in chronological order. And so you can read chapter 17 before chapter 2, before chapter 3. It seems a pretty cool way to lay out a book. And so I can't wait to read it. Maybe we here at Last Call Baseball should make our own summer beach readings. If you're reading some kind of interesting book or an interesting baseball book, recommend it to me. Send me a tweet, send me some message on Instagram. I'd be happy to share it and look into the book. Seriously, we're going to put down our books right now and go back to watching TV. You know what bothers me about sports, not just about baseball broadcasters, sports broadcasters. They're always saying something like, if the season ended today, the Houston Astros would be a wild card team. If the season ended today, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would be on the outside looking in. If the season ended today, the San Jose Sharks would be having home ice event. Stop. That type of talk has already started in baseball, and I made a mental note of it. It started on Memorial Day weekend, 6 weeks ago. What the heck are we doing? If the season ended today in baseball, there would be huge problems that you would be caring about more than the baseball season ending. COVID, hello? Like in COVID, when the baseball season didn't even start until July because the owners are just way too greedy, and they had to end up settling on, 60-game season? Let's not worry about if the season ended on May 27th. Let's not worry if the season ended on July 13th. All the major media outlets' favorite team, the New York Yankees, they're sliding. People are running on their catcher, on their bases, on their pitchers. Giancarlo Stanton is again on the injured list. There's so much to talk about. And these sports broadcasters, including in baseball, only want to talk nonsense. If the season ended today, the New York Yankees would be a wild card team. Well, let me tell you, the season's not ending today. The season's going to end September 30th, I believe, is the last day of the season. So worry about the playoffs and who's in and who's out in September. not in July. Enjoy your leftover barbecue. Enjoy your time with your family. Enjoy reading your books of World War I, of Seven Pillars of Wisdom, at the beach, under an umbrella, and stop worrying if the season ended today. Are you worried about the All-Star game? I'm not worried about the All-Star game, even though they're going to play it in Arlington, Texas in a week on Tuesday, July 16th. Are you going to be watching the All-Star game? Does anyone watch any of the major sports All-Star games? I remember I used to watch the NFL Pro Bowl every year. This is way back when they used to play it every year in Hawaii, the week after the Super Bowl. So therefore, even if you won or lost the Super Bowl, you still get on a plane, go out to Honolulu with your family, your friends, anyone else you invited over, and you played at Aloha Stadium. You had the flowers around your neck. I don't know, the lei, I believe they're called. It seemed like an amazing experience for players. I mean, all of them got their trip paid to Hawaii. But to be fair, most of them didn't need it. But it's a shame that the NFL did away with the Pro Bowl game period, and then not in Hawaii. Like, who wants to go play a Pro Bowl when they switched it to like Orlando, Florida? No offense to like Legoland and Mickey Mouse, but no one wants to go to Orlando. I'm not the biggest fan of Orlando. There's way too much traffic in Orlando. And then you remember the NBA All-Star game. I don't remember the last time I probably watched it was like when Allen Iverson was probably playing. And then the best All-Star games are obviously the celebrity softball games. You remember that? The Rock and Jock Celebrity All-Star games on MTV, hosted by Dan Cortez, Bill Bellamy. They had rockers, they had jocks, they had random reality TV stars. And they would always play it where? In Southern California. Not in Orlando. They wouldn't play the celebrity softball, the Rock and Jock Celebrity All-Star game in Orlando or in Aloha, but Southern California isn't a bad place to have a Rock and Jock Celebrity All-Star game. Why are we talking so much about MTV on this episode? I haven't watched MTV in a million years. I don't know. Maybe right now they're playing a marathon of 16 and pregnant. Back to the Major League Baseball All-Star game this year. When I saw the list, the biggest surprise for me, Christian Yellich. Dude, where have you been? No, not where he's been. He's obviously been really good this year. Where have I been that I have completely written off Christian Yellich? I seriously thought Christian Yellich was done. He had those two amazing seasons back in 2018 and 2019 when I think one of those years, I think in 2018, the Milwaukee Brewers were one win away from the World Series when they ended up losing to the LA Dodgers in 7 games in the National League Championship Series. Christian Yellich was an MVP. I think he was a runner-up MVP, and he had the Brewers one win from the World Series just 6 years ago. Well, that's not 6 years ago, a little far away. But yeah, Christian Yellich. I'm looking forward to that. Christian Yellich, I was like, dude, go you. Because I remember when he was with the Miami Marlins, and the Miami Marlins outfielder, if you remember, Marcell Ozuna, Christian Yelich, Giancarlo Stanton. That was the Marlins outfield in 2016, 2017. Here's a sliding door moment. When the Miami Marlins were shopping to trade Christian Yelich, there were rumors that the Atlanta Braves were going to trade for him. And can you imagine a outfield that consists of Ronald Acuna Jr., Christian Yelich, and Michael Harris II. It's a pretty good outfield. But congratulations to Christian Yellich, and I'm looking forward to watching the All-Star game next Tuesday night on Fox with all the experts. Here's another question for you. What surprised you the most in the first half of the season? For me, it's the American League Central Division and the Tampa Bay Rays. The Cleveland Guardians are running away with the American League Central Division. They're 6 games up in the American League Central because this is a complete 180 from last year when it seemed like no one wanted to win the American League Central and the Minnesota Twins ended up winning it. When I think of the Guardians, I always think that they play smart, efficient baseball, very much like the Tampa Bay Rays. But how in the world are the Guardians going to score in the postseason? That's always on my mind. No, this doesn't keep me up at night. But when I think about the Guardians, I'm like, okay, that's great that you guys have a winning record. You're going to go back to the playoffs because the Guardians go to the playoffs more or less every year. But do you do any damage? Do you make any noise in the playoffs? Right now, with the Guardians schedule that everyone plays everyone now in Major League Baseball. They're 10th in home runs as a team, which is awesome. They're 8th in runs scored, awesome. And they manufacture those runs, some of those runs through stolen bases, and they're ninth as a team in stolen bases. That's awesome. But in the playoffs, pitching quality jumps up. You aren't playing against the Chicago White Sox in the playoffs in October. You aren't playing against the Miami Marlins in October. You aren't playing against the Colorado Rockies in October. And who else in the American League Central? The Kansas City Royals. They're third place in the American League Central, but they may be a wild card team. But their offense, again, how are these Royals going to play in October? Because right now, against all the teams, they're 17th in team home runs. If you're being generous, that's barely average, barely. And do they even cause traffic on the bases to put pressure on the opposing pitcher? Against all teams in the MLB, the Kansas City Royals rank as 21st as team on base percentage. That is decidedly not good. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if the season ended today, the Guardians and the Royals would have a hard time scoring in the playoffs. I wish them the best, but I don't see how any of these teams are going to score in the playoffs. Can you imagine the Kansas City Royals playing against, theoretically, the Baltimore Orioles? I think that would be a very quick series. But that's why they play the games. We'll see. Look, October is 90 days away, 3 months. A lot can happen. But when I look at the American League Central Division, how well the Guardians are playing in first place, it looks stable. The Royals obviously are a great surprise, is that they have a chance to go to the playoffs. Who knows what's going to happen? It's 3 months. We're going to have our break next week for 4 or 5 days, and then the season starts again. And the Tampa Bay Rays, for me, they have such a high bar of excellence, especially pitching and defense, that the games I've watched this year, I've been really surprised at how not excellent. Not that they've played poorly on defense, but it's just their bar is so high that it sticks out to you when you're like, oh, I haven't seen the Rays play like that since before the pandemic, basically. Obviously the Rays, they're not the type of team. They don't have the type of player with the bat that can just erase the mistakes that the defense does. Errant throws, balls that you would expect someone with a Tampa Bay Rays glove to go after, to make outs. And the Rays famously, I think they've scored, 3 runs in the past 2 postseasons. It's just atrocious. And obviously, they are nowhere near a wild card team this year. Who knows if they're even going to make a run to the wild card spots by the end of September. So those are the 3 teams that have surprised me the most. Kansas City Royals, Cleveland Guardians, and Tampa Bay Rays. My last part here about TV. I don't watch a lot of television, even though I'm talking about television nonstop now. My last question to you is, how many games of baseball do you watch? And I ask that because when you go, for example, to turn on on the MLB Network, when you turn on to see the Fox Saturday night game every week, there's always these talking heads, and they're telling you about everything, and they sound like they know everything. Or you read an article online, and they're like, oh, so-and-so is having a fantastic past 2 weeks. Since June 13th, this pitcher has a ERA of 1.31. Most of these guys, I'm picking more of the guys on television. And girls, equal opportunity here. How many of these experts are really experts? Most of these guys and girls on TV, just giving you an example, MLB Network and Fox, they live on the East Coast. Their headquarters in New York City, in Manhattan. You're telling me that someone that lives on the East Coast is staying up past midnight to watch the Colorado Rockies play the St. Louis Cardinals. You're telling me that one of these TV analysts, or all of them, are setting their DVR to record the Miami Marlins and Chicago White Sox series. Or one of them, or all of them, are watching the Philadelphia Phillies series against the Oakland Athletics. I call shenanigans, straight up shenanigans. There's no way you know how the second baseman for the Athletics have been doing over the past 10 at-bats, for the past 20 at-bats. You don't know how well or how poorly the bullpen hit has been for the Cardinals. You don't. I watch 4 to 6 games a week. I'll watch highlights. I'll read articles. But I'm not getting paid millions of dollars to talk nonsense in Manhattan on one of these TV channels. My thing with these TV experts, just be real with me. Be real with us. Tell us that you receive notes from other people who actually watch these games. Pull back the curtain and tell us how the Wizard of Oz operates, because there's no way you watch all these games. They are every single night. There are 13, 15 games being played, and you can't just watch them all the next day, because the next day there's 13, 15 games to be played. The only sport I actually think that they're experts in are in the NFL, because the NFL and football, you're playing once, maybe twice a week. And a lot of these guys that write for the NFL, who are true experts, of course they have to DVR the games, but they're watching 2 to 3 games a day between Sunday to Saturday. And so you extrapolate that out throughout the whole season, and you're basically watching 2/3. You've watched all the teams multiple times. In one specific week, you're watching 2/3 of the entire games of the schedule of those games that week. That's the only sport I think you can actually truly be an expert in. And so that's what really grinds my gears about these TV experts, whether on MLB Network, on Fox, and anywhere else. You are not an expert. There are experts if you have, your own local TV. Whether you're a Houston Astros fan, a Tampa Bay Rays fan, Washington Nationals. Those guys, those TV announcers, the guys that they pulled together from, for example, the Roku at the top of the show. Those guys, they know their team. They're experts. They watch their team every single game, but not these TV announcers. Show us how you do it, man, because I don't believe you. Now that I finished my drink, that means it's the end of the podcast. My last question to you is, what are you drinking this summer when you're going to the beach? What are you drinking when you're going to the pool? What are you drinking when you're going to the lake? Because I don't know where you live. I just finished a beer called Harmless Fun. It's a mango guava goose from, of course, it has to be an American place because we just finished 4th of July weekend, a good American brewery called Smartmouth Brewing Company in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I like to keep it close to frozen, not a smoothie. I don't need to be crunching my drink. I want it very cold. This is a really good beach beer, or it was, because now it's in my tummy. Good beach beer. This is a type of beer that you can, sneak into your sun-kissed bottle when you're going to the pool, the lake, or the beach. By the way, this is not legal advice. And when you're walking to the pool, the beach, the lake, you can rock the podcast t-shirt. You can check out the show notes for the links to our social media, the podcast store. You can rate and review the podcast if you want. Thanks for listening to Last Call Baseball. Be great and get home safe.